Hello, welcome to the weekly Thread Insights group call. I always lose this game. I always go. We
Terrible
have,
in the game of chicken, Lindsay.
I know, I can't handle the awkward silence. It drives me nuts. Let's jump right into the agenda. And the first item is Matt's. You could have just
Thanks,
started, Matt.
Lindsay. I probably should have done the intro kickoff. That's what I thought Thiago was handing off to me, actually, but I was trying to get the agenda back up on screen while I was doing it, and in the intro, you started talking, so it worked out. All right, so I don't know if anybody's seen the Slack thread, but it looks like there's a couple of things where the DAS team is working in a particular area on their, so they're releasing or trying to release a new findings aggregation feature. So if you're not familiar, this is rolling up multiple same type DAST findings just on different URLs. And instead of creating one per URL, one finding with a list of everything in there. It looks like it's rendering well in the vulnerability details pages because those have had the new, at least that component of the new generic schema details block implemented. Seems like they didn't quite realize, and I guess maybe we didn't realize in time, that the MR and the pipeline modals are not going to be there until 13.12. And that is causing some very poor UX, I think, when they stitched it all together and did a walkthrough. So that's the Slack thread link. I guess the question is really, do we see any potential for, even if we were to put some stuff on pause for 13.11, to pick up that one issue? I know it's towards the end, but it looks like it's a 2-point wait. And given that the details page was already implemented, maybe it is a small quick win that would help another team out.
So I think part of the weight of that issue was considering an issue that's blocking it, which is to use the same component that we use on the vulnerability details page out on the modal for the pipeline view. So it would be either throwaway work to just update the pipeline view to grab this data. It'd probably be a good amount of throwaway work, or the size of that would be much larger. I really think we're kind of blocked on, from an efficiency perspective, on getting this done until we have updated the modal to use the shared component. Daniel, I know you just joined, but if you could just real quickly back me or see if I'm totally crazy on this, but this is about getting the generic security report schema working for some DAST ongoing work sooner to support some of their needs, but they need it displaying both on the details page and the pipeline modal. So you know that this current milestone, we've got a lot of work around the pipeline modal and flight to try and sort of use shared components and GraphQL endpoints, but none of that's done yet.
We if push comes to shove, I think Dave is still working on that part for the vulnerability details page. If we need it for the modal, I think the data is there. So if push comes to shove and they just need a small part of data, we could like fudge something and stick it in there without.
They could.
Yeah, without it being like actually generic. It's just sort of like hard coded for just that piece of data.
I know that they're also asking today in Slack around some of the other generic schema fields, like the diff field. I don't know if that's for the same effort or not, but.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about that one. That's more, I think Fernando was asking, hey, I'm about to do this thing. Is it going to get stepped on by the generic work later down? Yeah, that's related, but not here. Like, Daniel, I really like your suggestion. I think this is more kind of, if there's anything that we can shunt in to help them display that same information in that modal for the MR in the pipeline, then that would allow them to potentially release. There are other things, like I don't want to make it sound like this is the only thing blocking it. I would suggest everybody looks at the Slack thread, and I don't think it made it to the issue yet, but Cam had made a really good walkthrough of what their experience looked like, and there were definitely some odd behaviors, like the point B below.
This is mostly on the front end. Is there any back end that we can help with?
That's point B. So the diff is also kind of odd. So again, I'll point you back to Cam's video walkthrough. Basically, if you have run DAS scans before and you have multiple discrete findings, and then you run DAST again with the new version that can do this aggregation, the new singular finding is actually showing up as already dismissed in the MR if you've dismissed any of the original findings that are now rolled up underneath it, even though it's supposed to behave like a completely net new finding. And there's some other wonkiness in there too.
Did they just change the reports that they send us, or did they actually change anything on the back end on how we store the reports? I didn't get a chance to look into that at all.
That I don't know.
I know they were asking about it yesterday, but it does seem odd in the walkthrough that the location does still say page 1, and because it's still showing there as page 1, that location hasn't changed. So there's something in how we're storing those new reports. I think that's off.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So this kind of came up my time fairly late last night, and I was poking through the thread, and it looks like this is a very sort of late realization now that they're putting all the pieces together. I think the general ask is, because we don't have anything big coming out, and this is like a big feature for the DAS team that they've been working on for several milestones, if there's anything that we can do, even at the expense of stuff that we're working on, to help them get this across the line, that would be really appreciative right now, because I know they're even trying to line this up as like one of the main headline things for the release post.
Cool. So for the thing that you're talking about, the diff, I think Craig Smith was having a look at it. I'll catch up with him, see where he got with it, and then find someone on our side to either help or take over. And for the front end, I don't know what the plan is. I see furrowed brows, Lindsay.
Do you know what data type it is that they're waiting on for this? If it's not the same conversation we were having around the diff earlier? I'm just looking at this conversation right now, and I'm sorry I didn't see it before.
It's the URL.
Yeah,
We already have some of these done. I think URL might be one that's already available today.
Yeah, I think
We've taken a real iterative approach. We have an issue for each data type at this point, but Dave has been prioritizing a handful of them, and he's been working with Cam on making sure that those are what's needed. So I think there's already enough communication going on here. I think we have list, URL, and I think those are the 2 that are out today.
So
maybe one more.
In Cam's demo, he shows whatever Dave has already done, or there was I think a closed MR or an issue around what Dave already completed that enables them to show the right information on a vulnerability detail.
Yeah, so
that's why I was kind of hoping we just need to take that little piece, and like Daniel was saying, if we can actually just sort of hard code just that one little element for this release,
well,
then that would
Neil
let them show the
also
things in
reached
the
out
MR.
to me today saying that they have bandwidth and can do stuff, so it wouldn't derail anything that we already have in flight if they want to just crack open the existing pipeline modal, which also covers the widget modal. We figured out that that's the same code base, so that would be throwaway work on their part, but I'm curious though. So with the generic report schema, the data has to be under this details block to get consumed. Would they need to change things on the back end as part of their DAST implementation to go from something that is accessible today from the pipeline modal to the leap for us using
They've already done that work.
Okay.
It
should already be in the database in the Rails model.
Okay.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because it is further down in the bottom. It's like in the, I don't know if it was the evidence section. It was like, it looked like it was already
Evidence.
in the new section. Yeah, it's in the evidence section.
Cool. So I've got a one-on-one with Neil tomorrow. I can also jump in this issue and this thread and suggest that, because it doesn't look like we've even started on this pipeline conversion issue yet.
No, and I think that's kind of the unfortunate thing, is that it's been in 13.12. We had already kind of gotten this sequenced out, and this was just kind of a miscommunication.
13.11 even, so it's just not done yet.
Oh, the one that I was looking at specifically that they needed was still sitting in 13.12.
It was the one I asked about, wasn't it, Matt? Because I noticed it wasn't showing on the pipeline tab, and you said, yeah, we know we already have an issue for the pipeline tab.
Yeah, so I
don't think the
DAS team or Derek fully realized, like, because it wasn't there and we had it in 13.12, it was not going to be in 13.11 when they were trying to hit this release. Hence the kind of last.
I didn't realize either, so I don't blame them for not.
Yeah,
picking it
I
up.
think it's just one of those things nobody really quite was able to conceptualize what was going to happen until they tried to do a full walkthrough of it and went, oh no.
So we know what to do. We won't solve it now. If there isn't anything else, I propose we keep going with the agenda, and then Lindsay and I will take the stuff offline.
Right, awesome.
So Matt, that covered both of your follow-ups, right?
Yes, yes, it
Okay.
did.
I'll speak for Savash then. He added some demos. So I think he's realized that we've kind of fallen off a little bit about adding demos to our meeting agendas. He is working on the refactor of our vulnerability reports. This is something that Daniel identified a little while back to make it easier to do some of these conversions and just generally reduce the amount of effort it takes for us to maintain the 4 different reports that we have now. So he shared a link to that. It's more technical. And then B is the upgrade for Jira users. So I added the screenshot from his MR. He had previously given that MR. It's under review. So hopefully that'll bring in some dough.
Nice. Did he put in our affiliate link behind that button?
I don't know. I can look at the issue.
I'm just
He
kidding.
does it.
It's not a thing. Every time somebody clicks Thread Insights, gets a little bit of the ultimate cost.
I'm okay with that.
Be able to afford that llama at some point.
I added the planning breakdown item, so I guess I should be the one to bring it up. So this is a recently released item from Andy around filtering the vulnerability reports by detected date. I know there's already been some conversation going on here. Thank you, Daniel, for taking a look at this already. I don't know, Jonathan, if you've had a chance to look at this. I don't know if I see you do, you put a carrot on it. I'm so impressed.
did.
There's so many carrots on this issue, man.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be, I mean, this is a GraphQL call, right? And I mean, it'd be fairly basic to put another filter in by date.
Would
This came up
you?
as far as a performance improvement as well. I think this was a suggestion that somebody made as far as reducing what we're loading when the report initially loads.
I mean, I can't guarantee on the performance wise because it is just kind of a mess on the back end on how we pull things up at the moment.
You don't know what the query analyzer will do with that extra field.
I mean,
the question I had was about when you do the date range filter, do you want to put like arbitrary integers so the client can pick a range, or do you want to put the fixed values so the API matches the front end?
I think they'll be fixed for a while. We don't have a component where we can put date ranges in a dropdown yet.
The question is more for, because the GraphQL API is available for everyone to use, it may be more flexible to allow people to search for a custom date range.
Yeah, that was the question. And if it's a lot more work, I don't think it should be. But if it is a lot more work, then we can just consider not giving that flexibility.
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, on the back end side, I don't think it'd be that much extra work. This one actually probably would be not too bad on the performance wise because it's only looking for vulnerabilities. Unless we want to go all the way into the findings where, you know, then we have to start doing some table joins and whatnot. But if we just go like on the detected date on the vulnerabilities themselves, then it shouldn't be bad because we don't have to do any extra table joins.
So Daniel, one thing though, I know we're loading 20 at a time, but we are doing the count up at the top, you know, by the severities. And I think that was one of the concerns around the performance if we're having to count everything through all history. So if we just do 30 days, hopefully it's going to be a little bit better there. I think.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where we really need to dig into the query itself, because although we're limiting the data set, we're doing it by adding an additional where clause. So it might just be like you gain a little bit here, but then you lose a little bit there, and it ends up equaling out.
Yeah. Well, as long as I think the performance doesn't go down, this is also beneficial just from the perspective of really long running projects that have a lot of like mediums or lows or infos that they don't want to dismiss. I think that's kind of the other feedback, even from internally, is, you know, there's a lot of noise and they don't want to close things, but they don't want to see it every time they load it up. They just want to see like the new stuff. So it'll still be a beneficial feature, is what I'm trying to say, even if it's not a big performance gain. Hopefully it doesn't get worse.
We gain anything by not fetching all the counters, or was that asked? The counts at the top of the vulnerability
Yeah, that's
report?
kind of what I was asking, is since we
Okay,
have
yeah,
to do the
sorry.
numbers in there, but it sounds like this is
That's
TBD.
yeah. I think it's still something we'll always need is a way. It's 12 months of data. Like after a month, if you haven't fixed it, either you have a reason why and you want to keep it there, or
So it's something we'd want to do independent of performance gains. If we looked at this and said we're not going to get a single second off of load time from this, from a user experience perspective, we'd still want to introduce this additional filter.
I did have a question regarding Matt's comment on saving the value to local storage. We can definitely do that. It might take some discovery to figure out how that's going to work. And the reason is because for the filters, we currently have this weird thing where the data source, like the source of data that everything else is based on, is changes depending on what you're doing in the app. So normally it's what you pick in the drop down. So when you pick items in the drop down, it updates the query string. But when you click the forward and back button, the query string value for a split instant becomes the source of truth that then updates the selected options. And it can get a little funky depending on where you're approaching the workflow. Like if you're entering the page with the query string, if you're clicking forward and back, if you're updating it by hand. And so if we throw in one more where now the local storage can also set the value and become for an instant the source of truth, we may have to just kind of figure out how that interacts with the other two places.
What's the advantages? Why would we want to put this in local storage instead of continuing to persist it in the query string?
Because if a user is doing something else in GitLab and then goes to that vulnerability report, if we don't do it from local storage, it's always going to go to the default for the page. So if I've decided that I like 90 days and that's what I always want to see is my 90-day view, but you force me to 30 every time, now that's one extra click that I've got to make every single time I go to that vulnerability report.
Because I was looking at how the issue boards work today, and that's exactly how that works. I mean, the filters are driven exclusively by query string parameters.
And will that will we still have it persist per what's it called, level? So we have a different filter or the date setting for each level, or should it be global?
Are you talking about like per user or per? Like
So if I pick,
basis?
say, 90 days, and then I'm on the group level dashboard, and I hop over to a project level, but then on the project level, I previously picked 60. Should I save 60 for the project and then 90 for the group, or should it just be like a global, you pick 90 on this board, so on this other one, I'm going to show 90?
I was leaning towards it was per board, because I can see people wanting something like maybe a broader view on a group level, like a 90-day or maybe an all. And then on my projects, that's where I'm doing a lot of the, the tactical triage work. So a 30. That was the main thinking behind having it in some sort of, and again, it doesn't have to be client-side storage, just that user preference. I'm a little bit nervous about we are changing how much information we are showing in terms of the vulnerabilities by default. So if we let the users choose what they want to see, and then it's sticky for them, I think that's the best experience. But if it's always defaulting, I think it's just going to cause a lot of confusion and some frustration.
Is this something that we can resolve or approach independently of this feature change? Because this is something that I think is a question today with how we're handling filters. And just in the spirit of iteration, that's kind of a big piece of complexity we're tacking on to a new filter, which is already pretty complex.
Yeah, it's a fair point. We did change this a couple of times. So remember, we used to actually display all statuses way back when, and then people said, I don't want to see all the dismissed stuff. So we changed it to just the detected and confirmed, and we're hiding resolved and dismissed. I don't think we're going to have as clear cut preference in terms of like timeframes by default. So that's kind of my hesitancy here.
Well, since there isn't a huge performance bump by only doing the first 30 days, is it safer just to default to like all time and then let people filter down? So at least if we can't save it, right? At least when they enter, they're always coming to an all state of time that they can then kind of winnow down.
That's a good point.
And if we following up these questions with a new issue, I have one as well, which is something you ask good questions, Daniel. It got me thinking, what's the priority if you have multiple selections from different places? So for example, if I previously had the dashboard set to 30 days, but I click on a link that has a query string parameter telling it to do 90 instead of 30, which one wins, the query string or my personal preference? Anyway, we don't have to answer, but I think that should go in that follow-up issue.
Well, I don't know how to articulate it, but I kind of was trying to think through this. I think it's going to cause problems both directions, because I would normally say, let's do the query string, because if I'm sharing a link with you, I want you to see the view that I'm looking at. But then that means
you're overriding my personal settings.
Yeah, I'm overriding it. So then how do I know the difference between, let's say that you have a personal preference for 60 days in the dashboard and you choose to change the filter to 30 days. And then now the query string is updated for you. So in that case, we're going for your local storage first. How do I know? I don't know.
I like Lindsay's. I
If
like
we resolve
Lindsay's
this in an
suggestion.
independent issue, we can do it ahead of this new filter, so you don't have to compromise your design, right?
I don't know. I'm kind of wondering about just scrubbing the whole, like, remember what I selected and going with what Andy said and just default it to all time and just add this as a net new. I can choose to filter down from everything if we're not going to see like a big performance bump from it. So maybe that's the first thing to answer. Like if we did do a limitation on the number that we pull, if we do just 30 days, is that actually more performant? If the answer is like not really, then let's just go the easy path.
I honestly don't see it as being a big performance gain on this one. Like I said, the thing that's going to matter the most is the table joins. Unless it's just like a really tiny amount of vulnerabilities that it's pulling rather than a larger amount.
We'll find out as well, Jonathan, right? If we're getting a timeout with all and it displays with 30, then we'll go, well, there is a performance gain.
Yeah.
So
I mean, we can definitely do some testing to figure that one out too.
I guess it won't be any worse.
The thing is, right now, like we pull. I guess it's, if we're limiting the number of vulnerabilities that pull, because we pull like what 20 at a time from the GraphQL queries. Anyway, so we can do some testing on that.
Yeah,
So
and also,
next, go ahead.
Oh, also thinking a bit more about it as we were talking, it to restore the value from local storage would either be very easy or somewhat tricky, but not much in between. I'm leaning towards very easy, but there's always like those things where I'm like, oh, this is easy, and I go in and start doing it, and it ends up being like, oh, okay, I really underestimated this. So I don't want to commit to anything, but yeah, I don't really see it being, kind of like in the middle.
I'm hearing that we're leaning to just having a separate issue to figure it out that might even consider some UX, Andy, what a user would expect.
Yeah, I think some of the dashboards and reports that use time filters actually start out with nothing displayed, and then you kind of have an additive filter experience that begins presenting information as in issues or to-dos or anything else that's kind of filterable content or data. You see it starting with like one static point and then allowing you to kind of pick your path down it. So I think there's more opportunity for us to think instead of having like, it kind of feels like we're building on a shaky ground with a lot of like some defaulting and some not defaulting. So when I get back, the 3-month punt on that one. But yes, that is something that I think we should consider. Yeah.
So do you want confirmation about the lack of performance improvement, or are you going to take Jonathan and Daniel's hunch on this and we move forward with leaving the persistence piece out of this and just deciding whether we can move forward to the planning breakdown on the addition of the new filter? Matt?
Can we do both? I'd like to see if we could do like just a quick test or a spike on that, Jonathan. And if it like, if he comes back and says, oh man, there's like 10x faster to do it this way with a 30-day view on a data set like the size of the GitLab org project, or was it .com, then I think it's worth considering. If it's 10% better, then I don't think all the complexity that we're talking about is probably worth the effort.
Yeah, no, I mean, so on something like the GitLab data set like that, there's so many of those that are like that are old, that were there from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Not introducing the new ones. So on those, yeah, I mean, it would for sure increase and make the performance better because we wouldn't have to be pulling nearly as many.
If we could measure, Jonathan,
Yeah.
maybe somebody who has a production Rails console, try a couple queries, and that.
Yeah.
I don't even see it as a spike. It's probably like.
Can we agree, Matt, that the persistence can be handled in a separate issue based on the results of that performance spike? So if Jonathan comes back and says, yes, there's a big performance improvement, we'll create another issue around this persistence, prioritize that ahead of the new feature because it does touch more than just this one filter, and we can move things along that way.
Yeah, no, I liked it. I think that's a good place to cut it.
Cool.
And Tiago's frozen too, so.
Well, we're at the end of our time, so you get no chance to come back and say anything.
That's right.
I have one final question. Do we get any feedback from the survey yet?
Yes, we have gotten, Andy?
We are at 9, 10 completes that match our criteria, which is huge. So we're doing good. We have a total of 15 responses. So that's the highest percentage of like through rate right now that I've ever seen in a survey that we've launched here. So
That's
it's
like
awesome.
a 40% increase over what we already had after
Yeah.
trying to beg for customers to sign up. So yeah, it's great response so far.
17 responses in progress right now, 16 recorded.
Cool. Awesome.
Yes, awesome.
Thanks, everybody. I think we're done.
Bye, y'all.
Okay. See y'all.
Yeah.